Wow, I'm liking this, and it feels so smooth. I'm finding French polishing really frustrating, and not for the reasons you might think. It's been going quite well. I've got a lovely smooth finish. Well, it's a bit satin on the front, and I'm nearing the final stages. But in doing all my research, there are so many different views on how you should do French polish. I've read a number of books and a number of individual chapters in books, seen a lot of videos, and read little bits on the web and stuff. And they're all different. Sure, there's commonality because everybody's trying to get the same result. But every aspect of French polishing, there are differences of opinion. The fad, what it's made of, the size of it, the shape of it, how you wrap it, how you load it with shellac. Do you dip it in the shellac and wring it out, or do you use a pipette and you drip the shellac on it? Oil. Olive oil that I'm using, walnut oil, raw linseed oil, paraffin oil, I think that's the same as kerosene, and whether to use oil. One guy, I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but he basically said, don't use oil, oil is for wimps. And while that advice is sound for the early stages of French polishing, where the oil could seep into the wood, you don't want that to happen. For later stages, I'm not sure that's good advice. Now, this was a big guy, and he said that it's a very muscular process. I don't think he used the word muscular, but you have to really work the finish, he claims. Doesn't sound like that's for me. Sanding. Some people don't sand at all and just rely on the swirling motion to keep it nice and flat and work it up like that. Some people sand early in the process, some people sand late in the process. Some people use 000 wire wool and others use wet and dry. Most people use wet and dry, it seems, but some use it with water, some use it with oil, some use a detergent to lubricate. And when to sand. One guy sanded almost as the last stage of the entire process, and then used the spiriting off stage as his final stage. And this expression, spiriting off, the meaning of it, people have different interpretations of what it's supposed to do. It is generally a stage using just alcohol and no oil or shellac. I'll come to that. But some people think it's there just to get the oil off the surface of the guitar. Other people think it's a buffing process, a polishing process, burnishing maybe. And one guy has spiriting off as an intermediate stage, and he then sands after the spiriting off. And this idea of only using alcohol and no oil and no shellac, that's not entirely true, because the pad that you're using is the one you've been using for bodying, and that will have shellac on it and it will have oil soaked into it. So to say don't use oil, don't use shellac, is kind of hiding the sort of the real truth. So I've been agonizing over how to tackle the final step of the polishing, and I knew there were various problems I'd had on the previous coat. There was a little bit of sticking, a little bit of roughing, and I'm fairly sure that was because I was using too thick a shellac. I wasn't diluting it enough, and I was using too much of it. I really need to be a bit more sparing at this stage. And also the oil might have been a little bit suspect. The oil I was using was an old batch from the back of the cupboard. It was years old, and I think it was a little bit thick. I've got some new oil and it seems a lot thinner, so it may help that everything glide a lot better. But I was lucky this weekend to be able to talk to a furniture restorer, a French polisher of decades of experience, and he was very reassuring in that it seems that I've been doing things pretty okay. I've not been making any real mistakes. Everything that's happened is to be expected, really, and the stage I'm at, I'm in pretty good shape, I think. And so we were discussing this final stage, and his advice on using oil was use oil. The idea of putting pure alcohol on the surface as the last thing you do is dangerous. You're very likely to scuff the surface unless you're very careful about what you do, and probably very experienced. But with his decades of experience, he said he wouldn't do that. So he would still be using a little bit of oil on the pad. And furthermore, I'm going to use a little bit of shellac on the pad. I'm going to take my existing, the dregs of the shellac I've got remaining, and I'm going to dilute those down and use that for the very last coat. And I'm going to be calling this glazing. That's not my name, so it's not spiriting off. This is glazing, because you are using shellac. The guitar's in pretty good shape. The headstock I could almost declare finished at this point. The front has a slight satin appearance to it. It's not pure gloss, but it is very, very smooth. And the back is glossier, but again there are little patches of satin on it. So we've still got a little bit of work to do on the back. The side though, well, maybe looking at it, actually the side is pretty similar to the back in that it's not pure gloss. There are some streaks of a sort of satin finish to the side, so we can definitely improve the finish. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the masking tape off. I hope it comes off easily. Old masking tape tends to stick a bit. Yeah, seems alright. I'm hoping that it hasn't left too much of a gap. Do I mean gap? Too much of an edge. And B, it's pulling a little bit at the fretboard. And B, I'm hoping that I can soften any edge that has been left with this coat. Is that a bit sticky? At least no finish is coming away. The finish was very good on the neck, so it's not got no flakiness. Still being a little bit careful to slide it away and not just pull at the finish. I'm wondering, I think I might have to do some work on the neck, but we'll see. That it's a very good finish on the neck, but don't know whether you can see that. There are some marks. Yeah, I think there is a little bit of a line here, but that's okay because I think this final session should smooth that over. There is some very slight pitting in the surface, which I think you can see. It'd be interesting to see whether this final stage makes any difference to that. One source reckons it will, because the very thin shellac will fill those holes, but I have my doubts personally, but I'll try to keep an open mind, see how it goes. I'm just going to wrap the neck so I've got somewhere to hang on to while I've got hands covered in shellac without damaging the neck. It'll also help further protect it while it's in the vise. decant off my shellac, because I think, yep, there we go. So I have very little shellac. I was going to mix up a £1/2 cut of shellac, but for the amount of alcohol I'd use for a £1/2 cut, I'm hardly going to use any of this. So despite this being an old batch that may or may not have bits of oil in it, I'm going to reuse it. So now I know how much is in there, I'm going to add alcohol to it. And I'm going to add, I think, 3 lots of alcohol, 2 or 3 lots, let's see. That's 2 and a bit. Let's see what that looks like. Well, it's still very shellacky. I'm going to add a little bit more. Now a £1/2 cut wouldn't actually be 3 to 1. It would actually be less than that, because that isn't pure alcohol. If that was obviously pure alcohol, I'd put 3 lots in, you'd be diluting it to 1/4. But it's partly shellac, so how much extra did I? There you go, that's probably 3 lots of alcohol. So that's now a £1/2 cut. And while I'm here, I'll put some alcohol in my... And there's my fresh batch of oil. So I now have everything I need. So the fad I'm going to use is the one I was using previously. And the cloth, there's probably not much point in saving that cloth, but I will. I'm going to put a new cloth on it. And I'm going to apply a few drops of alcohol to it. Now the advice I got from my French polisher friend, and it's advice I've seen before, is that you want the pad almost dry. You see how that's squeezing through? His advice was it just needs to feel cold to the touch, which this does. But I've seen some other... His advice was to put it on your cheek, and just, if it feels cold but not wet, you're ready. What I'm going to do though is get a piece of white paper. This is 160 gram printer paper, and I'm just going to blot. And I hope you can see that we're getting blot marks. But pretty soon, as I'm blotting, those blot marks are fading. And now I'm not getting anything. So that's effectively dry. But, well, it feels a little damp. I don't know about cold. I don't think anything's going to feel cold in here. It is really quite warm. But that's now not leaving any residue on the paper. So that's ready to go. This time I'm going to put very little shellac, and this is dilute, remember. So just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 drops of shellac. And because the alcohol's evaporating all the time, 2, 3, 4, 5 drops of alcohol. Blot that off a little bit. drop of oil. But actually I'm going to put the drop of oil on my finger. And I'm just going to smear it on the pad. Actually, that is noticeable that that oil is much thinner than the stuff I have been using, so I think I was right to change the oil. Right, wish me luck. This is a game of extremes because there's so little going on here. In fact, from the angle that the camera's at, you can probably see very little of it. I can see my vapour trail, so I can tell there's something happening. But whether or not the camera's picking that up, I don't know. So I'm just going to keep swirling this around until it seems like there's not much happening, and then I'm going to go to straight strokes. I suspect I'm going to have to do this for several coats, but actually already the gloss is coming up. My hand's tired already. I don't know if you heard that, but I had a little bit of a sticky moment. Still got a very slight vapour trail. Okay, that really is starting to stick, so I'm going to change method. The advice seems to be that when you feel it starting to stick, just work it harder. But I seem to have a lack of stamina in my arms. I wondered about doing the back first, whether I should have done the front first. I think the front will need slightly more attention, and of course I'm going to have to now do it when it's in the vise, and I don't like applying too much pressure on the front when it's in the vise, but I don't have an awful lot of choice in the matter. Unless I was to leave this a day and come back to it, of course. I think I will have to do more coats of glazing, but this is having quite an effect. In fact, I'm really pleased with that. Hopefully the front will look equally as good. I'm pressing quite firmly here. This little spot there I'm going to hit first. So there's a little bit of sanding residue in it, in a crack, which I don't like. And I think that's just tackled it, so now we go. We're going to need several goes at this. I'm wondering whether I've been a bit premature with the final coat here. Well, maybe not. It is coming up. This is where it all gets a little bit dodgy. It does look like it's going quite well though, it is making a difference. I was a bit sceptical with it being such a satin finish and with so little shellac going on, whether it will really make a difference, but of course it's just the presence of alcohol is melting the surface and bringing up the gloss. You don't need shellac really to get the final polish. Still see all the swirl marks in the surface though, so I will be doing a burnish, but I'm just going to keep going for a moment until it's dry. One source said that I'd be doing this for 20 minutes. I think in practice, because of the heat in here, it's going to be less than that. And certainly I'm not going to inflict 20 minutes of swirling to you, so there will be either cuts or fast forwards. I'm going to do some straight lines now, not so much to burnish it down, but just because I don't think I'm getting a completely even coat up here. So I'm just going to use this to just get better coverage up the top of the neck. Oh yes, that's looking a lot better. It's really starting to drag now, so I think that might be it. The answer some people say when it starts to drag is just to apply more pressure. I'm not so convinced, particularly when it's in a neck vise. There's a little patch of roughness here, which of course you can't see. But I think there's been at some point in the past a slight bit of overspill, but it's not so much a drop, it's just sort of a little area that's just seems a little rough. I'm not convinced about the benefits of swirling on the sides of the guitar, but I don't want to use just straight strokes because that might end up in a few little streaks. That stuck a little bit just then. I'm feeling I might have to do the neck. I've just polished up the edge of the neck up here, and it looks nice, but it's now in contrast with the rest of the neck, so I don't think I'm going to have any choice in this matter. Side now looks perfect. I'm sure when I get it in a harsher light I might be able to see imperfections, but it's looking really nice. Wow, I'm liking this, and it feels so smooth. whole feel of this has changed. It feels so smooth and it looks really glossy, but you can feel it as you're polishing. It's that silkiness. Already I can see that it's blending in with the neck, that I've lost the edge that masking tape had left there, which was the main goal really, but the gloss is coming up on this, so just carry on going. There is a danger going this way that I'm going to have a little bit of build up on the edges here, but because there's so little shellac, I think in reality that's not going to happen. But if I had any more shellac on the pad, then I'd have to be really careful about constantly going against the edge. Don't know that that's going to achieve anything by swirling there, but well, maybe it did. It's been over an hour since the previous session, so here we go again. Now there are some little dots here, so I'm just going to press into these. I think it's still residue from sanding, so I'm just going to press into these with the initial cut and see if we can just fill in those little holes. Maybe not. Feels like maybe I'm still not quite full gloss over here. It's seems to be going very well over the rest of the guitar, but just here might be a little bit rough, maybe, just from what I'm hearing. That's looking very nice. Getting that dreaded scraping sound up here, but it looks really glossy. It just doesn't sound the same as the rest of the guitar. I'll put some straight strokes in, just to... It's easier to get up here with straight strokes. Still see a very slight vapour trail, but sometimes I wonder whether the vapour trail is actually just smearing of oil. Remember, there is only one drop of oil on this. And something I forgot to mention, I had actually wiped the surface of the guitar down, but even experimented with using a little bit of detergent to clean the front of the guitar, because I wanted to know whether the satin finish I'd seen was as a result of oil on the surface, or whether it was just the roughness of the surface. And indeed, using detergent on the front to remove the oil made no difference to the look of the guitar at all. I thought I was going to do a third session today, but I don't think the second coat, if you can call it that, went on quite so well as the first, because the surface is still soft. So I'm going to leave it a couple of days to harden and see whether I want to do another coat, but it may actually be finished. It is looking beautiful. I'll give you a proper look at it in the next video, because it's still soft, and I don't want to risk disturbing the surface. But we might be there. It might be time to put the bridge on, or do the fretboard, or put the machines on. We'll see. I've yet to decide what the next step is. It'll probably be the bridge. It's coming along.